Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining the conversation. Again, my name is CJ Ward, and a part of a conscientious conversation, once again, is termed as a conversation that only requires two or more willing individuals, an open and honest conversation, a conversation with the intent of improving the quality of life for the entire country and not just selected groups of this United Nation. So let's have a seat and discuss. So today, I have the honor of being joined by Dr. Shambra Mulder. So I want to make sure I got that right because I'm very respectful of people's names. So Dr. Mulder, thank you for joining the conversation. If you'd like to introduce yourself to the people.
Thank you for having me again. I'm Shambra Mulder. I have a PhD in educational psychology, and my clinical work is in school psychology. And so I've been doing this for a while. However, I spent about 10 years in public schools, then teaching at the higher education, and then having a private practice. And now I work at the state level. But my specific area of interest is trauma and work with children and adolescents. And so I try to come from a trauma-informed approach in addressing all issues related to mental health in our community.
Awesome. Definitely all fields that I'm passionate about. So I'm in great company today. So thank you for joining the conversation. Since, what you spoke about last, trauma and also youth, how do you feel about the current state right now, just in the midst of the pandemic and even before the pandemic? How do you feel about those two sectors?
I'm excited that I think younger people are more comfortable talking about mental health. I'm not quite sure that they know or that there's available support for mental health of our youth. There is a critical shortage of providers. And so if you encounter someone that needs a therapist or a psychiatrist, I'm not sure how easy it is to find them what they need. And, I'm being an African American provider, which is even fewer. And I focused on racial trauma and working with African American youth. I know that people want to see a Black provider, but again, I just don't think that's easy. It might be easier in certain parts of the country than it is in Kentucky, but I don't think it's necessary, but I think it is helpful, and there is some credibility in the idea of having someone that looks like you and share the same culture. But I am very concerned about the lack of mental health services that are available in terms of the number of providers and in terms of people being able to afford care because providers don't want to take insurance.
So if you could give just some advice for if someone was looking for like those services, what would be some of the initial steps that they should take?
I think the initial step, if you have insurance and you plan to use insurance, would be to call your insurance company to find out what providers take that insurance. I think the next step would be to contact the school. They have some providers there, or they may have some resources to get you connected. The third thing would be to check online directories. So there's a good one that I use, that's Psychology Today, just because I think it's common. It's not the only one, but it's one where you can read about the person, kind of get a feel of, what kind of work and how they approach their work, whether they take your insurance. The next thing I would do, it's probably just talk to someone in your community, a friend, someone else who might have resources. And the last thing is that each one of our counties, at least in Kentucky, have what we call community health centers. They are state supported, and they have sliding scales. If you don't have insurance, they can get you insured. And I think it's just a good way to work with the populations that don't have the money to pay. Because if you really want, and there's several different types of therapists, and there's not a lot of big difference between them. but the range could be $80 to $200 an hour. So it is, and I'm not saying that the more money they charge, the better they are. It just happens to be with the kind of degree and licensing they have. But I would research the person, and I would choose someone that best fits what I need. But I also know that you are in charge. And if that person does not meet your need, you can go somewhere else. That doesn't mean don't get it. It's just that this person is not a good fit for you, and may not necessarily be a problem that they have or that you have. You just got to find a good fit. And so I just encourage people there's value in talking with someone, a professional, as opposed to your friend, because this person has ethics that they have to stand by, confidentiality, and they don't have the emotional connection that other people have. So you might say some things that you wouldn't say to your family, you wouldn't say to your friends, that might cause alarm. And so there's value. Don't wait until you're in a crisis. There's value in just everyone having a therapist, including the therapist.
Very, very true.
I joke with people. I say I won't trust a therapist who doesn't have a therapist.
Okay. So I definitely agree with you on that. So people, be patient, take your time, do the research, find what you need. It's worth it.
Yes.
So you spoke about public, education. Was that K through 12? Or was there a particular area or?
No, K through 21, 20,
K through
25. Like colleges have counseling centers, schools have counselors.
I'm saying as far as your experience, my apologies.
Well, my experience has been K through 12.
Okay, so thinking about K through 12, I've had some experience in K through 12, and it was mostly in the Louisville area, also Frankfort, Lexington, and I had some experience in Paducah as well. But I know across the board, I saw there was a need for advocacy in many areas. What was some of your experience as far as providing advocacy for some of that population?
Well, in the schools, I was a school psychologist. And so many people don't get to the school psychologist. They see their counselors at the building level. They may see someone coming from central office. But as a school psychologist, we are specifically trained to do assessments for special education. And so it's like IQ testing and things like that to identify students that are suspected of having a disability. And so it's very few people see the school psychologist. I would like to change that, of course, because I felt like if we put those resources at the ground level, we would avoid students struggling and needing to be evaluated for having a disability. Many of the students, of course, many students have, disabilities from birth and things like that require special education. But we know there's an overrepresentation of minorities in special education because of learning disabilities and behavior disorders. Those are things that I would have liked the school psychologist to do some prevention work and interventions in the classroom, support the teachers, and get that kind of done in the classroom prior to needing to be evaluated for special education. But as a school psychologist, I'm expected to know special ed law and advocate that they follow the law and that schools actually apply and implement those interventions or those IEP goals. And so I'm teaching the students as they get older to advocate for themselves, because many people don't realize that special education as an adult goes into 504, what we call Section 504 disabilities. And so even when you go to college, you can still get accommodations, you can still get services, but it's going to require some, some self-advocacy. So all the while we're teaching people, this is what you, as a psychologist, I've done an evaluation. I'm telling the teachers and the parents, this is what's going on with this particular child. This is how you can intervene and help them so that they can have the best experience in school and learn. And then I'm also, as they get older, again, I'm bringing them inside. I'm taking them to the meeting. I'm showing them, this is what your issues are. We can accommodate for that. You can do some things about that. But what I found as a school psychologist, one of the reasons why I didn't want to do it anymore is because every 3 years we're required to evaluate the students. Yeah. And so I would see this kid again and again, and I'm like, okay, are they getting better? I'm not sure. What are we doing exactly? Are we putting them on a track of success? I'm not sure, because we know that if you study education and you look at the assessments that come out that kind of sort of grade schools and things like that, we know that a third of African American children are on grade level, and we are talking less than 20% of students that are identified with special needs are on grade level. And so we know what happens when you're not on grade level. They've shown that people, if 90% of the people in prison are the ones that are not able to read at grade level. And so I think it's great that we're identifying students with special needs. It's great that we're meeting and trying to come up with specific things, but there's a breakdown with the implementation. There's a breakdown in getting the outcomes that we say we're going to get. And so I felt like I'm part of, at the end of my career was, okay, what can I do differently? Because I'm seeing a pattern. I'm seeing myself assess students that I knew wouldn't qualify for special education, but they still need the services.
The services, right.
And they can't get the services if they're not identified. When they're identified, they're going to get, we said they're going to get some services that were going to help them, but I wasn't seeing the kind of results that I thought we needed. And so what I thought was, okay, we've got to take this thing back to the regular education program and school level and say, a smaller classroom would have helped that kid with ADHD, maybe some assistance in the classroom as opposed to pulling them out into another classroom. And so, the school has a unique position because all kids go to school.
Right.
And I think they're realizing that they've got to be more than just educating, that if you don't take care of some of those mental health issues, they're not willing to learn, they're not able to learn, they're not ready to learn, and you're not going to get the academic results without taking care of some of those other things. And so people say they shouldn't be doing everything, but they're really in a unique position to do everything. The reason why we have free lunch, because you recognize that students are hungry. Well, you're not going to learn if you're not hungry. You're not going to learn if you're dealing with trauma at home and you're stressing and you're dealing with mental health. It's just not important to them. It's important to you, but it's not important to them. Rightly so. I mean, not because, we in mental health and trauma work, we say, not what's wrong with them, what happened to
them. Exactly.
Right. If you go back to a kindergarten kid, or if you ever had kids in preschool, you're like, oh, you're going to go to school. They're excited. We're going to ride the bus and we get to read. We get to have fun. And then after second, third grade, you're like, I don't like this place. I don't want to go here anymore. So what are we doing?
That was me.
What are we doing? It's like, get there, walk a straight line, all the controlling things that we do and all the things that we think that we got to do for whatever reason but if you don't want to be there, I'm going to misbehave. I'm not going to learn, and we're all going to have a miserable experience. And so for me, I'm like, let's be more proactive and let's deal with some of the issues that are going on. But that was easy for me. I wasn't in the classroom. I wasn't a teacher. I was somebody that came in and said, this is what the child needs. And it doesn't matter if you can't afford it. It doesn't matter if you don't have time. It doesn't matter. This is still what they need. And that's what I was hired to do. And if they get it or not, is really not, on my back or not. But so oftentimes I felt like it was me against the school because I'm advocating for the child and for the family.
You're bringing up so many things that need to be brought up. So I was going to ask, were there any misdiagnoses as far as like the special education with behavior and vice versa? Definitely. But even before I asked that question, when I held up my hand, when I was like, that was me, this may sound wild, but in my elementary, they literally had a cage for the kids in the cafeteria that misbehaved.
Wow. Well, they can't get away with that now.
Well, exactly.
We hope.
Well, right, right. We hope. And the reason I wanted to bring that up, just the trauma that comes with that. We talk about misdiagnosis with those that need to be in special education versus those that just may have behavioral things, trauma. What would be like a remedy, or I won't even say a remedy. What could be the lasting effects of like someone having that experience?
Well, I recently talked about school as a traumatic place for many kids. Right. The kind of conversation, because it's very easy for us at the school level to say it's the kids, right?
Right.
And me as a psychologist, I was called in because this kid is having a problem. So the solution is focused on, and we're not really ready to talk about how we need to change the environment to work better for this kid. And so one of the things that we do when you say misdiagnosing is, you know, it's easy for me to say, or research says, children, you know, need environments where they explore and they get to, and then you go to school and they're like, no, we need you to be here, there, we got all these rules. Right. And so school itself, maybe for the, you know, and I would often hear teachers say, I don't have time to do that for them. I have 25 kids and, you know, and it's like, well, you don't have that one that's giving you problems. So if I were you, like, they're going to take up your time anyway. So why don't we just work? And there are some difficult kids, very difficult.
Very true. Very true.
Very difficult. Yeah. They, you know, and I would do things, for example, I only came in and evaluate the kid and the kid likes candy. If I can give them candy and get what I need out of them, I'm giving them candy, right? And the teacher would say, well, why'd you give them candy? That's not fair. Lady, I got a job to do. And if I can do it by giving them a piece of candy, I'm all in. At least that's something I know that works. Now, next week, it might not work. But today, I got a job to do. And so if it only costs me 10 cents to go get this piece of candy, I'm doing it. So, and if we take that approach as opposed to how do we look at have an individual education plan for every student, because every student's different.
Right.
And how do we make that work? And oftentimes it really is, how do we get a smaller classroom? How do we get more than 2 or 3 adults in each class? And so that we can spread out this idea, you know, we went to dividing kids by color, you know, and we all knew that that was the slow group and that was the advanced group, like the kids know, right? Even though we call them the dogs and the cats, and and so they know, right? And then we have the stigma and the trauma that comes along when you realize that you are not where you're supposed to be, and you're in this place that's constantly reminding you that you're not enough. Right. So I don't know if you've ever taken a foreign language, but we had to take 3 or 4. And it got to a point where you're like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what nobody's saying. Like, I literally feel like I am sitting here in a foreign land.
Right.
Imagine if some of our kids with English as a second language come in our schools, or some of our kids with that can't read. You're asked to be in a place 8 hours a day where you are not succeeding. And many of our kids have parents who had the same experience. They don't want to come up there either. So
exactly. We need parental involvement. You realize they're traumatized as well. They don't want to come to school.
The judgment that comes in. I have kids and I'm like, don't make me have to come up to these schools. They're going to look at me like, you know, you're not doing your job because your child's up here acting up. You know what I mean? So that enough alone, the judgment. I had my son's teacher one day, she wrote in a note to the parents. She says, well, I think all the parents that took the time out who cared about their kids and came to the PTA. I was like, well, excuse me, you thinking because they didn't come, they don't care about their kids? Well, I didn't mean it like that. Well, that's what you said, right? So we have quite frankly, we have middle class white women in our classrooms who've had a different experience than us, and we've said parental involvement is coming to the PTA meeting, as opposed to answering a text, calling, or an email. Or we've said that the parent didn't come to PTA, the parent didn't sell this. I was going to say something bad. Sell these little stuff.
Speak freely.
Speak freely. Cookies.
Right.
That I don't care about my kid when literally I have things to do.
Right.
So,
right.
and I've had that same, people, okay, you have a PhD. That doesn't mean I know how to teach reading. I expect that teacher to teach the reading. Now you can tell me what you're doing and I can support what you're doing.
Exactly.
But how often do your kids bring home things that you don't know? You can't implement it because you don't even know what they're doing. And you can't follow it. Yeah, if you tell me to teach these sight words, I can do that and I'll do my part. But at the same time, if you don't send that home and we don't communicate in some way, even if it's in the planner, then I shouldn't have to make a point because I'm all over the place. But this reminds me of No Child Left Behind. I remember when that came out. And I know people think it's bad, but let me tell you one good thing what happened.
Okay.
Schools had to publish their standardized test scores. Before that, you didn't know. So Johnny comes home with all A's. What are you to believe? That he is doing well, right?
Right.
But what happens when he came home with all A's, but his test score says he's 2 grade levels behind?
Right.
So you're saying, now, wait a minute, this is not adding up.
It's not balanced. What's going on?
Balanced. So that's where we are in Kentucky. We have the average ACT score is a 21 for all students and a 17 for African Americans. Mm-hmm. That's not college ready. Right. So how do you tell someone who's been in school for 12 years that they're not ready for college?
All that time, forced trauma for some.
It's especially if he was good at a football and basketball.
Don't get me started.
Got all those A's, right?
Don't get me started. Right.
You're like, what do you mean he's not eligible for the scholarship that they want to give him? Because it's like, what happened? And so that's one thing that No Child Left Behind said, that we have to be, and a lot of people don't pay attention to the schools, and I wish they did, because we're all stakeholders, because we all spend a lot of money. We send a lot of tax money to our schools.
Very true.
And our kids, whether they're mine or someone else's, they are the ones that are getting shot every week. They're the ones out there breaking in our cars. So we're going to deal with this
one way or
the other.
Right.
And we can keep moving out, man of war. We can keep moving out, trying to figure out, move it to another county if we have to, and living, but they're coming.
It's still going to come.
And they don't always look like the city kid and the kids that you think they look like.
Very true.
We're good about that, putting services in certain schools, as opposed there's no trauma about that. And I know we don't like to say there's good schools and bad schools, but that's what we believe.
Right.
And there's evidence for that. And unfortunately, our kids that look like me and you are in those schools that people don't want to go to. And I don't, and people ask me, because they know that I look at the data, what about this school and that school? Don't look at that data. You need to look at your child, because, some children will be successful wherever they are. That's the first thing. And then there's a price to pay when we send our kids to other schools where they're the only. There's a price to pay that we don't want to talk about. And, and so I'm on this kick now with the HBCUs, even though I didn't go to one, but I'm from South Carolina. So my neighborhood schools were HBCUs, but now that my kids grew up in Kentucky, I'm like, you don't have a clue. I went to the University of Kentucky for all my degrees, and coming from the environment of high school made the difference. So when we send our kids to some of those schools, the emotional toll that it could take when they're not grounded in their identity and their own mental health and their own self-worth, it can be more damaging than getting an Ivy League degree and a certain degree from a particular university or a free ride to one of those universities.
So you have me so many questions I want to ask right now. So the difference in education across the board. You started to talk about HBCUs. I have many questions on that. Talk about the differences as far as like schools, good schools versus schools that some may not want to, they really don't want to go to. So then we're talking about not just public education, but also the private education, private schools, and also even some charters, depending on your region. So I want to see if I want to share this experience, because when I came out of high school, well, I'll even say before then, I'll say probably around middle school, I wanted to go to HBCU. And the particular one that I wanted to go to was in Louisiana. So at the time I was about to graduate, not just at the time, of course, you had to do things beforehand, but I went on the recruiting trail because I was in sports, and I saw education from even another vantage point, because while you're entertaining, it's different than when you come to educate. It can't be in certain environments. But I reached out to this particular HBCU, and at the time I was ranked in my particular field, my particular sport. And I called them. I was like, "Hey, I want to come here." And they said, "Okay. First of all, we know who you are, and second, is you're better off going to PWI because we don't have the money for you." And just for me, I was just like, all right, well, here I come to a time where everybody says go to college, do the American dream, everything else. And then to be stopped and halted, because I was just like, I need to be somewhere where I get more of a sense of me. So I'm going into these institutions when I was younger. Although I had white friends, there was white teachers that, looked out and everything else, but just the experience that comes along with that, certain traumas that people don't want to speak about, microaggressions. I go into all that just to ask this question. Do you think the experience from public education really crosses over to private schools, or even charters? Does that question make sense? What I'm asking?
Would you get a better education at a private school and a charter?
Or just the experience?
The experience, I think the experience would be even more racially traumatic at a private school because of the lack of diversity and the lack of just diverse people.
Right.
Unless they're giving a few, I'm sure they're giving a few scholarships, but if you can afford this school, you're already sort of middle class or upper middle class.
Right.
So you're going to not get a diverse thought process and experience and socioeconomic sort of level. And so that is something that many people that choose to send their kids to private school, they also make sure they put them in programs and other things that can expose them to something different. So I think you have to make an intentional effort there. My daughter went to private school, the kindergarten. She went to a Montessori. So I wanted a Montessori approach. It was not helpful for her, but it was a good school. I learned over time that was not good for her because she wasn't a self-starter, and you have to be very independent. Then she went to a Christian school because we were interested in a Christian education. So I think, and then she hit microaggressions in 3rd and 4th grade. But if you go to a private school because they offer something specific. Now, I know some people that are Christian Baptists like myself that send their kids to Catholic school. Personally, I don't want them learning something else. That's just me, even no matter how good the school is. Because they're going to require them to adopt Catholic religious, and that's important to me. But if it's not important to you, then that's fine. But just know that the private schools often have a vision and a particular thing that they're pushing. And if that's something that you support, then that's good. We don't have charter schools. I don't know a lot about charter schools, but I do. My stance is that if your public school has proven that they're not able to do what you need them to do, I am open to options. Right. And I think they have more flexibility in what they can do. And that is something that some people might be, open to. Public school is one of those things where you can get what you need if you advocate and fight for it and have the resources to get it. And I ran for school board. And so I looked into this. So for me, it was Fayette County Public School has a lot of different programs. many of them don't have transportation. So it's not really accessible to people. And so, and I went to UK, which is a large university, has everything you can possibly think of. You won't know that until you talk to people and learn and take initiative to do that. Right. You will get what you need from public school because the squeaky wheel gets it, right? If I call up and they're, and advocate for my child, but I do have a problem that I have an education background, and so I can probably speak about things that most people can't. But other people don't have that kind of time and resources, and it should not be that way, right? I shouldn't be that, you had to know somebody to know that they had this program over here. And so that often leaves us out. It takes, probably 6 months for us to get the news that other people may have had.
Like, they've been keeping this a secret.
And then you still got to fight to get in it because there's a small number of slots. It's who you know. And so I do have a problem with that with public school, is that if it's public, it should be available to everyone. They should be intentional effort. For example, my son is in pre-engineering. Okay. He was in a pre-engineering program in middle school. I assumed that made him qualified for the high school program. He took a test. He did all of these things. He qualified. He did not get in. I asked him, you were trying to increase diversity is the reason why you started the middle school program. He's the only African-American male in here. So why didn't he get in? Well, we didn't know. We don't look at race. Well, how are you going to ensure racial diversity? First of all, his name is Malik. So, I don't know. But, and so my question would be, you're saying these things, you want racial diversity, and we're not going to even talk about the performing arts program that we have here. You got to be a child prodigy to get through 200 applicants and 25 slots, right? Wow. you can't be natural talent. You've got to be somebody who's had lessons.
Right, exactly.
And so we can't accept that many students because we don't have the space. We'll move the program to a bigger space. We don't want to talk that because we want to make it exclusive, right? We don't want all the kids in there, right? Right. So I do have an issue with public school being more like a private school for a lot of people, because people are good at getting what they need. I've been good at getting what I need for my kids, but it's constant effort, and it should not be. But I don't encourage necessarily, me personally, just because I know a lot about microaggressions, in putting our kids in private schools for the education, because on the psyche part is more important to me. I think we can supplement the academic part. And I also encourage HBCUs, because right now we want students to finish. It's not about getting into college, it's about finishing.
So do you see that crossing over into higher education? Some of those things from that you were discussing?
I think when it comes to college education, especially the undergraduate, you need to make sure that you check the accreditation of the school. And I think you need to be careful about online schools and for-profit schools. Program, if there's a school that has an actual brick and mortar, and it actually has so you do need to check the credentials of your school. But then I also, like, for example, when I started school, I knew I was going to graduate school. So if you want to go to professional school, meaning a law degree, a medical degree, and all of those things, your undergraduate years could matter, not so much that it's a particular school, but that you do well in your undergraduate years and that it's accredited. There is a saying, there are certain schools that you go to, like Ivy Leagues or Transylvania University here, where that degree, they know that the rigor of the education is there. The rigor is not there, meaning the GRE or the medical exam or the LSAT, things like that. And so if you're a good student and you're at one of those schools, it will all come out in that standardized assessment that's going to get you into graduate school. So I think for the undergraduate years, you might want to play around a little bit, but in all schools, it's all about researching the accreditation. If they're in a state where they're on probation, or they will promise you that they're going to get it, and they'll tell you that. But if it's not accredited, then you essentially did it for nothing. And for the most part, it's all about whatever your career goals. If you already know that you want to be just if you know you're going to go to professional school, you know that you have to do well. If you know that you're going to be an engineer, and you can probably get a 2.0 and be an engineer and do very well. It's one of those careers where you don't have to get an advanced degree, I think.
Totally get that. So thinking about all the levels that we discussed, just K through 12, even higher ed, and even into adulthood, how much does family dynamics play a part in just the pathway through education, through whatever means, you may go, public, private, charter, higher ed?
Well,
Pardon?
Yeah. So family dynamics play from generational trauma to all kinds of things. But for you as an individual, it starts in the womb, right? The proper prenatal care, the proper environment that the mother is in, all of those things are going to play a role. But once you're born, the kind of environment, preschool, early education opportunities that we don't offer all kids, right? We have Head Start and we have programs for people that have lower incomes. But for the most part, all kids will benefit from a nurturing environment. It doesn't mean there's this thing that used to be on TV where my baby can read. I don't know if you remember that. That's not necessary that your baby reads. It's actually probably inappropriate. So, every time I hear it, I'm like, why does your baby need to read? So,
right.
And then we don't want to put that kind of pressure. And I don't mind you getting a program like that, because that's going to require you to have some interaction with your kids, teaching them. But it also means you might be the kind of person that be like, well, you're not learning this and you're not doing this. Like, chill, it's okay. But interacting with them and having a nurturing environment and a learning environment where the parents are modeling learning. And so then we have that. And then you have preschool, of course, and then you have public schools. And so I think the family plays a bigger role in what their expectations are for you. For example, going to school, I have 2 expectations for my kids, and that's pass your classes and act like you got some sense. Only 2 things. I expect you to do your best. If that means it's an A, that's fine. If it doesn't, but you did your best. Right. And there's just no reason for you to be misbehaving. That's just that, it doesn't
standard, right?
It really don't take much to pass. I think if you're nice and the teacher, even if you not doing well, they'll pass you, right?
Right.
So
right.
Those are the bare minimums, right? But we also need to, as we'll learn our children, we'll see what they can and cannot do. So I'm not a big fan of you got to get all A's and that we're going to pay you for grades and things like that. That's not necessary. But the expectation is that you will go to school, you will do what you're supposed to do and get your education, right? When you come home, you will do, certain things to make sure your grades are fine. And as they get older and start showing some interest in things, you might want to expose them to things, put them in things, the piano, try everything, try sports at that, and realize that they are individuals. They think differently oftentimes, most of the time. They're going to want to do different things, and that's perfectly fine. We're not living through our kids or anything. And support them in doing those things if they are positive. And if you see that there's something going on where they're not getting what they need or not learning as fast, get them the services they need as early as possible. Don't wait. There are services. I used to say you can get books at the Dollar Tree, right? It's not expensive. We have libraries. The resources are there if that's what you want to do. And so take advantage of those resources. And then if your expectation is that they go to college, make that known and prepare them for that and start that as early as possible. If they don't want to go to college, I think college is for everybody. I know people say it's not. I think it is. I just think it's your job to find what kind of college is best for you. If that means community college or a small private college, a big college, it is for everyone. Take a class, do, whatever, I do believe in furthering your education, and I believe in studying your craft. And so if you want to be a cosmetologist, go to that school. There's nothing wrong with that. But whatever you do, there's probably a school where you can further your education, even if you're a musician, all of those things. The idea is that we are encouraging learning, and it doesn't have to be formal, meaning you have to go to college, but we're readers, right? And the family's reading. And then all the other stuff, which is sort of a no-brainer, is that our kids are watching us and we are teaching them, and we are leaders, whether we want to or not.
Right.
And they'll say things that you say, they're going to do what you do, and they're watching. And it is a very, very serious matter for me for raising kids. It is training. And it is not easy, and it's not fun sometimes. And you're going to have to make decisions that you don't want to make, and they may respect you for it, and they may not, but that doesn't matter. They'll learn. You're going to keep them safe. And then just all of the trauma. I don't know if you've heard of adverse childhood experiences. And so those are the traumas that people have had before the age of 18 that's shown to be very detrimental as adults. There's 10 of them, but we know that there's more than those 10 that have been studied. And so for me, trauma is anything that is going to change the way you look at yourself, the way you look at the world. And so in order to learn that, we have to talk to our kids.
Conversations.
I've asked kids, like, how do you know your parents love you? And they say, well, they buy me things. No, that's not how you show people you love
Time, communication.
Time, effort, listening. Like, how do you love someone that you don't know?
Exactly.
Do you know your kid? Do you know what they like and don't like? Are they even able to say what they like and don't like? We're old school parenting is you got to be seen, not heard, right? Well, kids today are different. They're not going for that. They are exposed to things that we can't even imagine.
They've been watching.
It's not even because they're looking. You can Google SpongeBob, and Lord knows what might come up on the internet. Right?
Very true. Very true.
And so we've got to pay attention to that, and we've got to talk to them about the thing. And I'm going to do a shameless plug right here, only because I just said it outside.
Okay.
I have, as part of my nonprofit organization, created a coloring book.
Awesome.
That's entitled Talking About Mental Health with Your Child, and coloring book. And what I wanted to do, besides be diverse, is have a coloring book where people adults, it doesn't even have to be a parent, grandparents, or older teen, can have the child color, but also learn about a mental health topic. Now, this is not a script, but I want you to read that and have a conversation with the child about 10 different topics. And even if you're older and you don't want to color, I know these topics like unhealthy thinking, you can have an activity for your child. But what I wanted to do was normalize talking about mental health, normalize talking about having symptoms of mental health, even if you don't have a diagnosis. Life is hard. I learned this through the pandemic. I was talking to someone and I said, we just need to talk about it every day, all day, in a healthy way, of course. Absolutely. And somebody should do something. So I'm like, maybe that somebody's me.
You. So I know we spoke about several different sectors. And also, I'm gonna be conscious of your time. I know we're coming up on an hour and everything, but I asked this. I know you said you currently work at state level. What things have you seen talking about family dynamics, talking about the different sectors of education? Like what is really important on the state level when it comes to education, and what would you like to see the state going as far as educational services, especially when it relates to like trauma and that informed type of care?
I think the state has a lot of resources and opportunities. Of course, at the state level, you're dealing with regulations and legislation and all of those things that inform what the schools do on the lower level. But I would like to see the state probably get a little bit more involved in what goes on at the lower level. They have resources, but oftentimes it's a funding issue of getting more teachers and more counselors. And so they can certainly deal with the funding of schools, and they can deal with the resources that are available to schools. They can deal with how they measure schools and how they support schools, and not waiting until the test results or something says that they're in dire need to give them the support. You shouldn't have to, fight over resources, so to speak. And just so the state level is good. What I've learned is that government has a real opportunity to make a difference in a lot of people's lives. Now, what I do at the state level is really dealing with people with extremes and sort of more significant mental health issues. One of the things that I didn't deal with it prior to this. And so it's, that population that nobody wants to talk about and think about, maybe our homeless people that we know are dealing with mental health and they need services, those kinds of populations. And so the state has an obligation to help people who don't have the family support, who need a guardian or who need disability, who need certain things. And so the money in healthcare, the other day I was thinking, they say the love of money is the root of all evil. So I'm always looking at where's the money? What's the money issue? Like there's always got to be a money issue, right? And so with the lack of mental health care and just medical health care for people affects whether you're able to do preventive stuff or you're dealing with once there's a problem and a crisis. If you had mental health services available to people who can advocate for themselves, if everybody had health care, true health care, then I think we could deal with a lot of our issues if we, took care of the poor. Basically, that's what I see government doing.
Okay. Take care of your neighbor. Look out for your neighbor.
Take care, they're taking our taxes, whether we want it or not. I would love for it to go to what the people that need it.
Right. I'm definitely in support of that. So I definitely appreciate you for your time, your conversation, your insight, and your perspective.
Thank you.
Just in this conversation, this is one of the reasons why, I really wanted to, start this and, not only start it, but maintain it. Just, most of the time we're in technology, very, not really social, although we have social media, but it could be taken for its intent. Everybody has their reasons. But I always appreciate a good conversation and, definitely from a certain mentality and perspective. So is there anything lastly that you would, like to say as far as if it comes to trauma, mental health services, or just anything that you would like to share?
Well, I think you're having conscientious conversation. Reminds me to just be conscious, stay woke, pay attention to what's going on within yourself and what's going on with the people around you, and notice that they're in need. And when you're in need, and seek out those services, as even if it's difficult, just keep looking, keep trying to find it, because we all want to live better. We want to be better. We want to be better for other people. We got to be better for ourselves. And so mental health is just part of being a human and having a brain.
Right.
And as long as you're breathing, it's never too late to improve. Even those of us who are, quote, high functioning, it takes a lot to function at high levels, right?
Very true.
Concentration, everything. And so we all got to take care of our mental health, and we all got to do some things more. I know we talk about self-care as in just relaxing, going on vacation, but self-care is sometimes setting boundaries.
Intentional. Yes.
Boundaries, using the word no as a complete sentence.
Absolutely.
and keeping those boundaries so that you can protect your mental health.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you. Yeah. You are appreciated. So, yeah. So, I mean, once again, like I said, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So, in closing, once again, I appreciate everyone for their attention, and thank you for joining the conversation. And until next conversation, I hope this message reaches you well and helps you along the way. Be encouraged and make this day, evening, or night a great time. Until next time, I appreciate you.
Nothing ever was handed, all about respect, never about ego. Wish I could have retired a long time ago and disappeared way beyond the trees. But my homies kept influencing me, said they needed to hear my lyrics, like my flow, cause they felt my spirit. Plus the people needed to hear it, a conversation with conscientious lyrics.